I grew up through Theatre Royal Stratford East, and at Theatre Royal Stratford East, the ambition was to get the whole of the community in to see every show. And I believe that's what we should be trying to aim for, as opposed to aiming for, this is a black show, this is an Asian show, this is a South Asian show, blah, 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 and then you target an audience. I believe that we watch great storytelling. And by we, I mean everybody watches great storytelling. So that's my ambition. I think that the National, of course, has had to look at itself in these last 2 years, I think, actually. And what, you know, since Rufus took over, but obviously it's accelerated and amplified. And it's done a lot of work in the sense of it's had a racial equity consultant. We've had listening groups. We're very conscious of the global majority and the lack of diversity in the workforce. I think all those things have undoubtedly been heard and are in the process of being looked at and managed, and we are evolving. I don't think anyone's going to see. It's hard to kind of make people feel the change, even though we are evolving. One of the biggest challenges in terms of the programming is always going to be, can a new writer from a diverse background fill the Olivier? It's just a really practical question. 1,100 seats, over 60 performances. You know, very few people of colour have managed to do it. We are still trying to take risks on the box office and deal with our mission in a way that feels as though we are evolving and mean to evolve. So you know, me having Deaf of England on in the Olivier was undoubtedly Rufus trying to, and Nina trying to answer that call. Having Anu Palmer's piece, which is coming out next year, The Father and the Assassin, is another definite effort in that cause. I think the notion that the National Theatre doesn't do any diverse work is just not the truth. In the Littleton and the Olivier, there's undoubtedly a development of people of colour that we're hoping will end up being a pipeline towards the Olivier. The programming, I think, if you look, if it was really clearly looked upon, you'd actually go, okay, no, the targets that the National Theatre decided to do in 2015 have actually, to the most part, been met. Whether or not they're strong enough targets, having me just arrived, I could question. But those targets, which were, and I'm going to read them out to you so you can really hear the type of, yes, I'm going to say it, change that has happened since Rufus came on board. It was nothing for many of you who are too young to remember or know. It's never been like this, ever, 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 ever. For me to be in this position, if you talk to my 25-year-old self, that would be a joke. It'd be a sad joke, a really bad joke. It's incredible that someone with my background is sitting in this position talking to you about it now. But I'm going to give you these figures. 50% of living writers for our stages will be female. 50% of directors working on our stages will be female. As an average, there will be a 50-50 gender balance on stage. 20% of writers from our stages will be Black, Asian, or ethnically diverse. 20% of directors working on our stages will be Black, Asian, or ethnically diverse. And at least 25% of performers will be Black, Asian, or ethnically diverse. Now, something that I've always wanted to, with my years of experience in theatre, what I've recognized is that there's a building and then there's the individual, i.e. the artistic director. And and there's too much focus on what a building used to be, or what how we perceive a building to be, what we think a building will stand for. And sometimes we forget to look at the actual people working inside the building and have an old idea of what the building is trying to, well, the people inside the building are trying to achieve. You know, I recognize this through my affiliation with the Royal Stratford East, seeing so many different artistic directors over the years, and how the sensibility and taste of the work completely changes with the different artistic director that comes in. So I think that's something that we, and you as artistic directors of the future, I think that it's something that you should cherish, in the sense that there's the building and then there's you, and your take on the work, on the ability of the work, on how far it can reach, is something that will be an individual choice on how you deal with those factors, i.e. the finances, i.e. the mission, etc. And how you balance that will be up to you. There is no building that has its own rules. It's just the artistic director's taste. There, I'm going to pass over to Nina.
Thank you, Clint, and thank you for reading out those targets, which, you know, in some ways, my former colleague at the studio would, Emily McLaughlin, would refer to it as nothing short of a handbrake turn. And I always love that, because every time she would say the word handbrake turn, I would sort of hear, ah! But like this idea of a very big ship with a lot of people working in and on it, coming in and out, changing its entire way of committing to a set of values and principles, and what that looks like, how frustratingly long it takes to be visible and felt, how frustrating actually isn't the word, how impossible it is to wait for those values and belief systems to begin to permeate the actual fabric of a company and a building. This is, I mean, we want change, and we want it now, we want it yesterday. I was always, before I started working at the National, staggered by the fact that the first living female playwright produced on the Olivier stage was in 2008. That's a lot of years of women writing and not making it to a big stage. You know, so look, there are a lot of stats and ways of looking at them, but I just can't underscore enough what a change that those numbers really do represent. So I'm going to just step back a second, and then I'll kind of go straight into the details. So what we focus on, I guess, like what the project is, and this isn't quite artistic direction, but it's sort of the building blocks of how some of the policies work out when you're in the new work department. We've got the stages that we are set up to fill with work, with prospects. It's a very, very steep funnel, about 1,200 play submissions a year, probably about 500 artist proposals per year, which come in at various different tiers, some right into Rufus's ear, and some of them through a more generalized procedure proposals inbox. And then generally through various different artists under commission and on attachment. There's a huge amount of kind of propositions for workshops and development. All of that is designed there's this kind of, I'm trying to capture what is the sort of dynamism between the very, very wide funnel that takes ideas and propositions, And the small percentage of those that arrive on the studio schedule. So the studio schedule is basically made up of 3 different spaces for workshop and development that we have within the studio space housed on the cut there opposite the Old Vic. So there's 3 main workshop spaces, which a lot of you probably know, and a process and a budget and a procedure for keeping those spaces filled with material that's being directed towards the stages. Though we have, this is a pre-COVID sentence, we have an allocation for support weeks and projects and companies that we host and look after and kind of subsidize their development periods. I'll tell you how it's actually working now. And that studio schedule is designed to culminate every Friday in sharings that culminate in programming decisions. Often those decisions are about a further workshop, more rewrites. Sometimes it's a pass, but what the best of Fridays is when you're able to make a green light decision and program the work. And then that work goes on to something called the rep chart, which represents the 3 different spaces at the National in parallel linear tracks of chronology. So what that means is you can see what's going on in January of 2023 in each of the 3 spaces. And what you start to see is kind of like that programming the National and the nuts and bolts of the artistic leadership of the National is like a Jenga game. You move one thing out, another thing goes in. Oh, these 2 spaces are set, but now the thing we want to do in the third creates, it doesn't match with the things that are already. So there's this whole patchwork quilt that emerges. And also, I find if you looked at the flow of rep chart over the last, let's say, 8 years, you would see the change that Clint just described in numerical terms as a qualitative artistic one. And you would see that what it feels like to come to the National changes by what you put on its stages and what's on in each of the stages and what it means to be able to find your route through the National over time and across the spaces to see something you would like to see and that you think is for you. It's implausible that every single thing on at the National is going to suit every single audience member. There are differentials of taste and taste that's been cultivated over many, many years among theater-going audiences or people brand new to the form. But the idea is that you should be able to, and this is, I think, one of the ways I conceive of the diversity, is that those quantitative changes begin to feel more qualitative over time, and that you start to find highlights in the program that you feel, so that there is always something on for you at the National. And that is even more of a pronounced change because we are now proliferating work onto screens, whether that's in cinemas or empty at home. That has been one of the biggest changes for us in the last 2 years. It was, happening and happening strong for ages, but the pandemic really fast-tracked a certain way of getting our work out to the public. And I guess I want to put in context that if you can stand back from that picture I've just given of all the propositions coming towards the 3 stages and a long program of work and a company that is programming 3 to 4 to 5 years ahead, often around actor or director availability, to imagine all of that activity kind of stopping in its tracks puts, I hope, in perspective how much work became backlogged and what it meant to begin programming again. And Clint knows better than anyone what it was like to reopen the doors, start a show, and have that false start that we had at the end of 2020 with the repeated closures. We are facing, as the new work department, a real challenge because it's irresponsible to overdevelop, overproduce new material, over commission, when we still have such a great deal. I mean, we're still kind of wrapping around to the workshops that were scheduled for March of 2020. And so you find a kind of National Theater and a new work department that's coping with a desire to reflect change, a refreshed sense of taste and mission, a completely robust commitment to always putting what we think is exciting and new and thrilling for our audience on our stages. But after all of that stoppage and the impact that we know it has had on our freelance community and that we know it has had on the artists who have been at the receiving end of those cancellations and postponements, you can imagine what that programming and leadership challenge is. And so I do think that's one of the things, as we try and keep the buildings connected, the development and production buildings connected, we are both facing a real problem of stripped budgets, smaller teams, much more difficult constraints and changed working environments, and yet a hunger and an appetite and an insatiability of trying to get all this work on. And I guess when you say, what are we doing? That describes what it feels like. I'm going to run through a couple of the programs that we run through the studio that I think speak more directly to how do you get involved? You know, this talk is roots in. What are the roots in for artists? And I'm just going to go through some headlines on those, okay? So one of the things I think is really important is that producers are able to find their way into the new work department. And one of the biggest changes and innovations to come out of the pandemic is a program called Generate, which is a support program that we run. It allocates R&D space and workshop resources to theaters, artists, and ideas that are destined for stages outside of London. This is about moving what amounts to 30% of our resource, allocating it to companies who will take it to help them make work that will not be premiering in London. That reflects, as I said, this idea that in a backlog situation, we don't need all of that resource, and the industry and the freelance community and the non-London based companies desperately do. So that is a new program, Generate. For writers, there is always new play submissions where your play can be read. And I think it's a great moment to just tell you the team. So the first person who will usually touch a play submission is our senior reader, Dipo Barua Eti. He has a team of readers, and for Work of Promise, he sort of, the scripts reach myself, they reach the dramaturg, Stuart Pringle, and they reach the Connections dramaturg and artistic associate Ola Anamashwan. So a play can find its way in, get its first read. That is, we have a firm commitment to turn that around within 12 weeks. You will either get a report passing on the play, or the play is tracked upwards. And the things that could happen if the play is of promise or the production holds potential is that you will either be offered an attachment, which is a 6-week period of time where you're given a writing room within the studio building, a weekly wage, and artistic and dramaturgical support. And you don't need to be making the work for the National, but it's a time to actually really dig into a new play, a new idea, a new approach, a new adaptation, and get involved at the National and become part of that community and ecology of that studio building. There will often be a reading or a chance to hear the play at the end of an attachment, and you can arrange the attachment either in a 6-week chunk or across 3 years, doing it in 3-day chunks. And I've seen many artists do that as well. We give about 18 to 20 commissions a year. These are for new plays, but also for canonical adaptations. That will usually be a radical adaptation of a classic text, whether that be a project like K. Tempest's adaptation of Philoctetes, or a new version of Enemy of the People, or a new version of Three Sisters, or it will be a brand new play. And we also have a huge amount of reading and consideration we do around novels and, other forms of existing fiction and nonfiction. And a program that is very much worth mentioning within that for writers is the Peter Schaffer Commission. This is a new program that we started just during the attachment, where commissions are awarded. We will award 2 commissions, and we have a number of commissions allocated that we will partner with regional theaters, and they will identify 2 writers that they want to commission. And you can find a little bit more about that on our website. So that is the Peter Schaffer Commissions. As we move from writers to directors, we cover a huge number of shows. We have a really brilliantly well-organized system of receiving proposals, mapping what's on in London and across the country. We have an eye to international productions, although it doesn't feel quite right to be traveling internationally around the world to, to be covering work when, as I say, slots are quite in really high demand, and there may not be a programming reality attached to seeing a promising show in another country. But we really brilliantly and comprehensively cover and report on material that's produced across London. And so that is a great way to have us see and become familiar with your work as a writer or director. And I'm just going to run through a couple of the different ways that we engage with directors. These are all by invitation only, and I know that can be difficult because it doesn't feel as accessible, but I can only swear to and stand by the depth of commitment to cover artists at even the earliest stages. If you let us know about work, we will we aggregate a huge number of invitations, and we go and see so very much with an absolute view to finding a route in for emerging artists. The earliest way in is a program that we started in 2018, 2019 called Kindling, and it's a stream of artistic development and support. And it kind of serves two aims. The one is to diversify the directors who we work with and trying to have it be truly representative of the country, but also to create a way of engaging with a pool of directors who might not yet be quite at the level of being staff directors, but are, those who are making exciting work, have a lot of experience perhaps as theater makers, and a lot of those artists who are coming through Kindling are working in youth groups and participatory work, and maybe haven't yet had the benefit of assisting other directors, whether it's because of a lack of regional opportunities or socioeconomic barriers that prevent them from taking on unpaid experiences. So this program offers a huge range of opportunities to enrich and support and open up the National Theatre to them as a potential artistic home in the future. They get to see tickets to see NT Live broadcasts at local cinemas, tickets for NT shows, plus a return trip to and from London, the opportunity to assist in one of our large workshops rather than a full production run, and to get to grips with how lead artists work with our performers and writers. And then we get to know the directors better. There's the 2-week-long directors course that we run, and every year we bring about 12 directors together who are making a strong impression with their work that they're staging either in the fringe or studio venues around the country. And it's a 2-week course that is designed to inspire and enrich and tool up participants and create a really strong peer network. And it's got a great track record, the directors course. I'm sure many of you have heard of it or perhaps been through it, but of identifying and nurturing directors who will then go on to really strong roles within the theater industry, making work on national and international stages. The staff directorship, so each show at the National has a staff director attached, and they do the work as assistant director at the National Theatre, but they're also a member of staff, and they work really closely with the rest of the building. And that, to me, as a director, is one of the best ways of getting completely immersed in what it is like to make work and develop a show for the National Theatre. On an average year, the new work department, who actively recruit directors for this, meet about 100 directors a year. But the last 18 months, it is quite staggering to consider what the impact of our closure is on directors trying to find their way into the industry. And so we're working again with programs like Generate and Kindling to really begin to open more doors and offset some of that impact of closure. And then there's the resident director who is based in the studio and helps us to cast our workshops. And it's an opportunity to learn much more about the development processes and how we create workshops at the studio. I wanted to also and for this meeting, just talk about what, because it's not always something that's in the write-up, but what do we do for emerging leaders? And in the past, we have run a lot of programs for early and mid-career staff. We've done it in partnership with the Royal Opera House and the South Bank Center. We've had secondments from the CLOR Leadership Program. We've run Accelerate, which many of you may know about. It's a training program for staff who identify as global majority or deaf and disabled. It's also Momentum, which is a joint mentoring program. And then internally, we created something called a people leadership program for 15 staff members already within the organization, and it's based on an apprenticeship. We've worked with creative access interns in the past. We have a design bursary, and we also ran step change for mid-career development at the NT. Again, these things are coming back up, but you know, as I said, and I keep sort of reiterating, the moment that we are together here today and kind of looking at, well, what is going on and how do you find your way in? We're getting it all back up and running, but you know, considering we weren't really, we haven't been a full studio quite yet this year. We're not doing all of our meetings yet in person. Getting things back up to full capacity, it's taking time. And I have to say, it's taking a huge amount of patience for us to get our doors back open for these development tracks for practitioners and leaders. I'll turn back over to you, Clint.
Well, time now is an issue for me, I'm afraid. It's now 3:15. So I was actually going to put it over to you guys to ask questions. I know that Alice, sorry, I've put my glass back on. Sorry, Alan, you had a question. I saw your hand up.
It wasn't a question, it was just a tool that I wanted to place to you, which is just that I think that those statistics are really admirable. And like you said, it's a break change, but it also represents national diversity statistics as opposed to local. And I didn't know this until last year, but 37% of Londoners were born outside of the UK. That's first generation migrants, and 60% of Londoners are global majority. So those of us who live here and have kind of this weird cognitive dissonance of being both the global and local majority and having that not represented on the stages of our national theaters. Like, I think when you go into those conversations, yes, it's admirable, but if you think about the national as a London theater, it's still not enough. And I think that's something to kind of hold on to as a statistic. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you said that. I mean, I did prefix it with, I'm not sure that these numbers are the exact numbers that I would be looking at. When I say looking at, hoping for, or I think they're a good starting place.
No, it's not your fault. I'm just saying, going into those conversations, take that with you, because I found it useful.
But the point is the National Theatre is the nation's theatre. We're not a London theatre, and that's something that.
So then this is really good. Get statistics on what percentage of your audience is London based and what percentage of your audience is national, and then prorate your diversity. Because again, that I feel like the crown jewels are hiding behind that. And I think that it's really important that we call them up on this, like with statistics.
Yeah, as I said, these statistics are kind of based on the country. If we look at the country, you know,
look at your audience
are something like 5%, and we obviously we try and tour, and we have a responsibility to the country, not just London. We are not just a London-based theatre. That is not our ambition. And I believe nor should it be our ambition to just think that we are serving Londoners. But fundamentally, we're in agreement. I want more too. And I suppose I want to get to the point where we're not actually having to focus on the figures, because it's the artists that are coming through. That the feeling is that the most talented artists are coming through, regardless of who they are, because we're at a place where we sense that we have racial equity. You know, if we had that racial equity, then there'd be a year when there'd be just Asian shows. There'd be a year when there's just Black shows. There'd be a year. Do you see what I mean? That we're not really focusing on. Because the other challenge, and Nina will I'm sure back this up, the challenge that we find is that sometimes the work or the artist at a specific level who wants to be in theatre, that they're not around. So let's say we have a great artist that just come through the Royal Court, great writer that's come through the Royal Court, and we go, God damn it, she's of colour and she's amazing. Let's book her up. The problem is film has also thought the same thing. TV's also said the same thing, and she's already got a commission from the building that she just had a hit in. And then you kind of go, oh, so she's kind of unavailable for 2-3 years. And this can happen quite a lot in terms of, as a building that is trying to find artists that have a track record, that when they do pop, everybody wants them. And so we have this challenge. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be battling the challenge and trying to get them in here and all that sort of stuff. Just trying to make everybody aware that this is some of the issues that we face.
Clint, this is Jonathan here. Hi, so much.
Hello,
I know you've got to
Jonathan.
go, but you have expertise in musical theatre, and also the conversation here seems to be very much about the Western canon and also strict bass. What would you say? Any thoughts about people into musical theatre, maybe devising, and the non-Western canon, you know, through a national British lens? And a lot of people here are mid to quite late career directors, leaders, you know. So, you know, you've heard there's a lot of, so firstly, other forms and sort of those that are much further on, how to possibly engage after today. I know you've got to go, but in a nutshell, perhaps. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the type of work is not ever the question, in the sense of, I don't think I was ever talking about any specific genre of theatre making. Yes, I've got experience in musicals, and I intend to do more musicals. I intend to produce work that has music in it, and the building is undoubtedly focusing on that as well. What was the other question? It was
and there's what about the two things about, so there's been a lot about text-based, so you know, so what about practitioners here are more devising or physical theatre? And then
all forms of, I mean, that was my original point, wasn't it? That in terms of what I love about theatre is the different ways that we can create it, and we can have our voice expressed in almost any theatrical way, as long as it's good.
Okay,
you know what I mean? As long as it works, you know, and that is one of the fortunate things that I know I've had in my career, having so many pieces come through the National. There's nowhere on earth I would have got the type of support anywhere else to create something that was against a normal structure. So can folk here just write into, I think Nina talked about the new work email, or go through ADF, or how do we, you know, absolutely, we do hear it's about the 3 spaces and 3 national spaces to funnel. Thank you for both of you for your clarity, but you know, so it'd be useful to know from yourself and Nina, how do we keep, it's good to hear all the behind the scenes today. How do we sort of stay in touch? We understand, and we understand not everyone's going to get through, but it's that engagement. It's great that you guys are here today. Thanks. Yeah, a pleasure to be here, to be honest. And I think all the things that Nina was pointing out were the routes into the building, and all this stuff, to be honest with you, is on the website. You know, it's all really front facing and out there and clear, and really literally just look it up and you'll see what all the things that we have on offer. There's no secrets.
I had a question. The question is, Nina, you spoke about the Emerging Leaders Program, and you named a number of organizations that you were working with in relationship to that particular program, and I wondered again if ADF shouldn't be on that list of people that you're engaging with through that particular program, because this is where you will get the artistic directors and many creatives who are working really hard out there and developing their craft, as well as maturing their craft, because people have been, as Jonathan said, people are at different stages. So I wonder if there is an opportunity for the emerging leaders to include ADF members in that. And so yes, have a conversation about that, and let's see that kind of thing happen.
Yeah.
And the other question again is, I mean, you spoke about Clint, you know, the next bright thing suddenly being booked out, and also the fact that you are working specifically with mid-career creatives, and I wonder, where is the space in the National where people who are in the beginnings, where are you linking up with those people so that by the time everybody else is looking at them, you know?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Actually, I was gonna in terms of the job titles, there literally are teams of people inside the National that where it is their job to spot and track the careers of emerging artists, to pick them when they're ripe to be able to come in, or even before they're ripe to come in and play. I mean, that's again, that's what I was trying to say about the fortunate scenario that I had with the National, in the sense that they allowed me to come and play for nearly a decade before I actually got a gig. Now, in terms of it, you know, I'm not saying that was great that I had to wait a decade. I'm saying that I was able to perfect my craft. I was able to try different ideas, and what was really interesting, which is something inside me, which I would suggest that maybe you take on yourselves, is tenacity. Is that you don't like that idea? Okay, I've got another idea. A lot of people stop when they get knocked back, like, oh, that's because it's a National, they're not going to take my idea. No, it's the idea. It's not you, the person that hasn't got it. It's the idea that hasn't got it. And what we should be as theatre makers is our windmills of ideas. You know, I'm not saying it's about wearing people down, but Nina's going, well, maybe it is. You know, but in truth, you know, it's about proving that you have sustainability, you have desire, that you have ideas, and a fire in your belly. You know, yes, of course, we have just said that it's all for people that we've tracked, and it's all for people that somehow we have seen and or have managed to set the theatre world alight at a different theatre that doesn't have as many seats, etc., etc. It's not entirely true again, because we still have first timers on, you know, and a lot of the time, sometimes those first timers have had different experiences that have led them to say, right, so they might have been acting for 10 years, or they might have been directing for 10 years before they start writing. They've got a deeper understanding of the work. They're not virgins in every aspect. You know, you know, the proof is in the idea. Proof of concept and proof of idea. If you keep coming in with that, there's no way on earth anyone's going to keep turning you down if the idea works.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, because I really do have to ring off in just a moment, but if I could leave with one thing, I mean, the thing that we are looking for, in addition to the qualitative things of freshness and originality and that kind of thing, but the word we talk about most often is scale. And scale does not mean that it's got 14 people in it, and scale does not mean that it's got a gigantic set or is 4 hours long or is set in the Elizabethan period. Scale is about an ambition to reach a huge audience. That might be about talking about your own personal experience, you and your best mate, and a defining moment in your relationship. All of those things can be scale, but there is an outward looking, open-hearted desire to tell an incredible story to an audience and give them a brilliant experience in the theater, in a way that helps them or shows them, raises their awareness, around some aspect of being alive today. There's something about that that to me is the common tie between so much of the work that we are interested in and develop and produce. And this ambition to reach a wide, large audience and create an enjoyable experience, which doesn't mean it has to be a comedy, but it is this desire towards expansiveness. And I guess that's just what when asked, what is it you're actually looking for? I guess that's one of the ways I think of defining what we're looking for. And that would go across, as you say, Jonathan, devising, and Nick, very good point about that it's also about a breadth and diversity of approach, but whether it's musical or straight play or whatever.